Welcome to the Image Critique Show with Jeff Johnson, Rick Avalos, and their special guest. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Well, good evening, folks. I'm glad you're tuning in for the Image Critique Show. This is a new thing for us. Ricky, how are you this evening?
I'm doing terrific, and I'm excited for tonight and our guest. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. We've, as you know, for this past year, we've been bringing you folks some image competition help. And I think we've had a lot of success, a lot of feedback, positively. Matter of fact, the one thing I think is kind of cool, we had 3 folks who have been watching the show this whole entire year, 23, entered images in competition at the Colorado State and did very well. And a lot of them, they were attributing to what they learned on our show from our various guests. So that's cool.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very cool.
I gotta start watching those programs.
It's going to be that kind of a show. Hey, so we're just going to have some fun here. So our new endeavor for this year is we're going to bring in some of our dear friends and the ones that are more intelligent. I know that was a worry there for a minute. We have our first guest for this new year and our first show of 2024. We have Mr. Bob Coates joining us from Arizona. And Bobby, hi, it's so good to see you. And thank you so much for being a part of the show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I look forward to sharing.
Well, I don't know if Sharon's here, but no, Sharon is here. So first bad joke gone wrong.
Airplane and don't go.
For those of you who are tuned in, you can see this is how it's going to go. Hopefully you're going to be laughing and hopefully you'll get some information. So anyways, and then of course, welcome to our dear friend, Cliff Lawson, who is our engineer for the show.
Indeed, Cliffy.
Good to see you, Cliff. Thanks for coming again this year.
Good to be here.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see Bob again. Haven't seen him in a long time.
Yes, sir. Not since Now They Lay Me Down to Sleep.
That's right.
And what year was that, guys? You were telling us about that earlier. What year did that, back when it started?
Well, what was it,
Too
Bob?
long after that.
It seems to me like in the 2010, 11, 12-ish range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Something like that. Yeah.
Anyways, so we got a few folks tuning in. We're just kind of stalling a little bit, so we get a few more guests online to watch. A couple things we can just share with you that we are going to record this show, or we are recording it, and I'll put it up on our site so that you can go back and watch and rewatch and tell all your friends about it. So we get those thousands and thousands of listeners to tune in and see what Bob has to say, and so on. And you know, if nothing else, you pick up some bad jokes from us. You can write them down. So imaging is coming up here in what is it, next week, guys, already?
The 25th.
Yeah,
25th is when I'm heading down to Phoenix to get ready to fly out on Friday.
Very cool. Yeah, well, it's going to be a good show. Hope a lot of you folks are going to be able to make that one. Ricky, you're not going, are you? Because we're not.
I'm not going to be able to make it.
Yeah.
Last minute situations.
But you've been a couple of times before. Is this not going to break your streak?
This will be the second time in 40 years I have not.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah, I had a pretty good streak going, but I've missed it a couple of times in the last 5 years. So, Cliff, how about you? Have you made it many times?
No, I'm not. I can't make it this year either.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Bob's going. He can take notes for us.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, Bob
Indeed.
is, in addition to everything else we're going to learn about Bob tonight, you're involved with PPC BRE. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm the BRE chair. And for those who don't know what BRE is, it's bylaws, rules, and ethics. And I can't wait until March when my tenure is up.
Oh, okay.
I can imagine.
Have you had some bad decisions, or not, I should say bad decisions, tough decisions over the time your tenure?
The only comment that I will make is I cannot comment about anything.
Well, I wasn't looking for details.
Confidential.
Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to
it. You got it, brother.
That's probably a group that never has any real disagreements, huh, Bob?
No.
Oh,
It
my
wasn't, it
goodness.
was an experience, and it was it was a challenge. If anybody does want to serve on that committee, if they, if they ever put throw their hat in the ring, I'm sure that they're always looking for people who are, willing to spend some time and help out the organization. It's pretty important.
Well, I was on the whatever they call it now, image committee, print committee, for a few years, helping choose what panels they put together for the actual judging. I mean, this was even back when they were still. You remember physical photographs? There were these big things that you would actually put in a box and mail it there.
Oh, yeah.
I got a bunch up on the
What
wall
are
right over
those?
there.
Well, what you do is you pull the image up on your screen and take a shot of it from your phone, and then you have it printed out at the drugstore. And anyways, so Rick, you go ahead and let's get things rolling here.
Let's do it. To our friends, our viewers out there, our colleagues, what a great opportunity we have tonight. The first showing, the inaugural conversation with, if you check our site, that's where it is, conversations with. Jeff is laughing because he knows what I'm talking about, the Midwest. But I am so pleased to introduce our guest. And yes, Bob has been a friend of Jeff and I for years and years. But I want our viewers, our family here to know that we just don't ask our friends. We ask people to be part of this program, part of this community, because they know what's going on. And they have the track record to prove it. And to that point, Bob Coates, I mean, you've been there, you're going there. I mean, we're going to talk and visit Bob about a lot of things tonight. But and I could list your accolades, and we'll get to that eventually. But just briefly tell me about yourself. And
well, photographically, I started back when I in high school. I wanted to do art, but I could never get what was inside my head onto the paper. And I'd be in art class and I'd be working on something, and it'd be, oh man, and I'd tear it up, and the art teacher would be like, "Why did you take that apart?" I said, "Well, it wasn't what was in here, but it was fabulous." That's, which kind of reminds me that a lot of times when we take pictures, there's a tendency to know what you have in your head or what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you don't quite get there, but that doesn't mean you have made a bad photograph. I just, because that thought, just pops up real quick, since we're talking, that's where we're kind of chatting about tonight. But anyway, over the years, I finally found photography, and I mucked about with it for 13 years off and on, did some stringing for newspapers, won a contest or two. And then I went to, got tired of the job that I was doing. I said, what do I really want to do? And I said, you know what? I think I want to be a photographer, and made that commitment, and then just kept going.
Wow. Well, you made a comment a couple of minutes ago that really struck me, that it wasn't a bad photograph in so many words. What do you feel is the difference between a good photograph and a not so good photograph?
If you've accomplished your goals, it depends on what the image is going to be used for. There's going to be a different look for a commercial image. There's going to be a different look for a boudoir or a wedding image, or a professional headshot is totally different than a family portrait. So it depends on what the end game is and what the end result is.
Okay.
In my world, I like to find what's up here, which can be really scary. As you know, Rick. I like to be able to, push the envelope and move things out. Sometimes it's to raise money. I was just looking back through some of my old image competition images here that I'll share somewhere along the line. if you'd like.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Okay. But I was looking in here and there was a thing when my dad passed, I went back to where he was living, and his next door neighbor who he used to share meals with and come by, and she was a little bit older than him, but she would be always like, "No, Joe, make sure you keep the door open when you're here having spaghetti with me." But she was just a sweet, sweet, wonderful woman. And I knew I would never see her again. So I went and I said, "Would you mind if I made your portrait?" And she said, yes, I really would like to have a portrait. I didn't know at the time that she wanted a funeral portrait made.
Yeah.
But we ended up putting that together. And so I made the portrait and I redid it. And when I got back to Sedona, at the end of the portrait session, I said, "Is there something really important to you that you would like to have in your photo with you?" And she grabs her Bible, and she's 98 or 99 years old. She's got her hands wrapped around the Bible, made a couple images with that. I arted it up, if you will. And then I went to the local Sedona Community Center that does Meals on Wheels and said, "I would like to donate the proceeds from this image to raise money in honor of my dad."
Oh, wow.
And it ended up being really big. It was, it was selling very well. We raised like $2,500 and actually got it up on the wall here still.
Can we see that? Is it
sure,
possible?
I think I can reach over.
That would be so cool.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, tip it down just a little bit from the top.
Could you give you a close enough
Oh
idea?
yeah,
That's
Yes.
awesome. That is
that's
just
beautiful.
Oh, that's great.
And
very
you know what, Bob? I think you hit it. Well, I know you did, because the image is gorgeous. In addition to
I
that,
couldn't hear you. Sorry, I pulled
Okay,
my
I'm sorry.
earpiece out.
you hit it when you were talking about the image. I mean, the image is gorgeous, no doubt about it. In addition to that, you mentioned something a few minutes ago about the story. And that's where I am when it comes to portraits. And Cliffy, he does such wonderful veterans photographs, as does Jeff, with his work. But the story, do you look for that kind of thing, or does that just happen? Does the story motivate you, or the subject?
The subject, and then once you talk to the subject, like people say, "Oh, I'm afraid to ask," when you do street portraiture, "I'm afraid to talk to somebody. They might, I don't know I do know what the fear is. It's like somebody might say no."
right. Isn't it true?
But you know what? There was, what was his name? Oh gosh, I'll think about his name. But anyway, I was in a class and somebody said, "We're going to go out on the street in Chicago, and we're going to do street people portraits." And he said the major thing was you don't just try and sneak a photo. You talk to people, you find a connection first before you raise the camera. You get to the person, say, "Oh my gosh, oh, look at that, your puppy. Oh, he is so cute. Oh man, would you mind if I pet your puppy?" Next thing, "Would you mind holding the puppy so I can take a picture of you guys together?" Boom, you were in, versus just trying to, steal it. I mean, he stopped a guy in a motorcycle on the streets of Chicago and ended up doing a portrait of him against the skyscrapers in Chicago, and he's like, "Oh man, your bike is just absolutely blah." Again, making that connection first before, and then the stories come.
Very good.
The other part of that story of the hands was, it was hanging on the wall as a 30 by 40 canvas, and somebody came in and said, "What is that picture of the Bible doing on the wall in this non-sectarian place?"
Whoa.
In that kind of,
Yeah, what was your answer to that one?
I had no answer because I wasn't there, or I'd have told him.
Okay.
But anyway, they ended up pulling it down.
Really?
And so obviously it wasn't getting the exposure, and it's just kind of frittered away slowly but surely. The title of that was Enduring Comfort.
Oh,
which didn't hurt it either.
Yeah.
So the thing that happened was the community center said, "Oh, Bob, since we don't have that image to do anymore, could you do a different image for us that we could sell?" I was like, "What? How could I find something that had that much power?" And I
Right.
thought, okay, maybe if I take a picture of a flower, nobody would be crazy about a flower. So, hey, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, you should be good. Go ahead.
Okay, desktop 1 is now desktop 2. So I was like, and oh, that's right, you got to push the share button too. Are we in?
You're in. Good.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
So I was like, oh, but who would buy a single picture of a flower? How could I be that good? And then it was like, oh, maybe I can do a calendar of flowers and raise money that way. And so we ended up with this project here where we've got, there's stories in here too, but each one had its own little feel. And this is probably my favorite story here was February. When my dad and our family, we used to travel, back and forth to the shore. My dad, he'd be singing songs, and one of his favorites was, "Let me call you sweetheart.
Oh.
I'm in love with your machine. Let me hear you whisper that you'll buy the gasoline. Keep the headlights glowing and your hands upon the wheel. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with your automobile." But if you look,
Too cool.
I took the roses and made them the musical notes
Right.
of "Let Me Call You Sweetheart," and that was, and the rest of the images were all just trying to do something totally different with each one.
That is so cool. And I've seen some of your work, Bob, with the repetitive. I know you know what I'm talking about.
We call it step and repeat when
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So my question to that, and seeing that beautiful image that you just showed us, are you a musician?
Only in my head.
Me too.
Or a lot of things in our head. That's for sure.
As you just heard, I can't carry a tune in a bucket.
Well, I can play the radio.
Yeah.
You go, absolutely.
Beautiful images, Bob.
Okay, well, so that we ended up raising about $15,000 when I first brought that out. And that brings me to a thing when, and maybe this doesn't quite go into the image making, but in sharing your work, I was sharing the images at the Kodak Gallery Awards. I had an image at Kodak Gallery at one of the conventions, and I was just trying to raise interest in getting this thing printed. And I'm talking to somebody, and I said, "Hey, how do you?" Oh, he says, "Those are some really gorgeous." And, "Oh, that's pretty incredible." I said, "Yeah, I'm trying to get it printed as a calendar to raise money for the Meals on Wheels." He said, "Well, we're putting together a new printer at Kodak. And if we gave you a bunch of images, would you be willing to let us use that as our mark?" Like, are you kidding me? So they ended up
let me think about that one.
Well, let me think about it.
Yeah, they ended up printing about 2,000 images for us, or 2,000 calendars for us.
Oh, fantastic.
And then we sold the back cover for, to actually was originally to pay, but then money ended up coming straight in. People were buying, for $300 a piece. They got to sponsor 1 month in the calendar. Anyway, that's, we digress a little bit, I think.
Not at all. That's a great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great plan.
We want to know as much as we can about you in the time that we have here. So let's talk about, you talk about passion with the storytelling and what you're doing with these fundraisers. And this is, I guess, so secondary in a lot of people's minds, but I guess we have to talk about it in terms of how do you approach your images with like gear, equipment. do you get to the point where I want to know my gear and equipment so well, it's so unimportant so that I can do what I'm doing here, as you're showing with these beautiful images?
Exactly. And I consider, things like the calendar project, that was what I call a personal project. And I've built my entire business and my life in photography through doing personal projects. So every time I want to learn something new, I will practice and I will give myself a self-assignment, whatever it may be. And then I will go after it. And then once it's done, I'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. How can I sell it? So
you're thinking personal project first, and then kind of depending on how it comes out, then you're going to try and figure out how can I get the rest of the world involved.
sure. Well, the picture of my dad's next door neighbor, Genevieve, that came from, I just knew she had character in her. I mean, you don't see her face there, but
Right.
the portrait that I made of her had just so much character, and she was so beautiful and had so much depth and dimension. This became a personal project on the side. Was, wow, that's got some really good, interesting. That's not even close to where it started from. There was a lot of artwork there in darkening it down. She had on a light blue jacket, and that would never have had the same impact if I had not done the Photoshop work to it.
Yeah. Well, we see your work, your portraits, this beautiful example that you have here, but you're not limited to that. We visited just a few nights ago, right around New Year, and you were say I'm not a big New Year's Eve guy, go out type of guy. If I do, it's to photograph what? Musicians. Is that right?
My nightclubs and stuff. I have a contract with a restaurant nightclub that's been, let's see, I did their pre-opening stuff. We did a whole project built around getting people excited about them opening their business. So what I did was I made a little Polaroid. Do you remember the old Polaroids where you
Sure
pull
do.
them out of the camera and then?
Sure do.
I still have one.
Okay. So I kind of made this little Polaroid template. And then as they were
This Polaroid
picking, they were picking colors for the restaurant, or the electrician was, hanging the new lights, or whatever was going on. We documented it, but we put it inside the pictures went inside the Polaroid. And then I used a handwriting font with the owner's voice, filling it in. And we did all this stuff. By the time they were getting ready to open, people were like, oh man, we can't wait to see it, because they had been tickled so much with it.
Wow. Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
What motivates you in all areas of your life? Photography, your philosophy.
I have a need,
because I visit with you many, many times over the years, and I think we're both weird.
There's no doubt.
But we have at one point we come together.
Yeah. I would say I have a need to be challenged to, if I was able to master photography, where I knew I could do exactly what I wanted to do with no problem whatsoever, it would probably be time for me to retire. I don't think there's any way in the world that I will ever be able to. Every time I start to think that I'm a pretty good photographer, I go out and look and find people who really are.
Good for you.
There's always that next level that I know that, wow, that's a pretty amazing image.
And you know what?
Give myself a self-assignment, see if I can do that.
Yeah. Good plan.
And that kind of, I don't know. I think about, if you want to do something, accomplish something, I've learned and internalized, only take advice from someone who is where you are or want to be.
Or where you want to be. Yeah.
Where you want to be. But
anyway,
that's just my thing. Go for it. Continue, please.
Yeah. Well, initially I So I was in the Virgin Islands at the time when I stopped. I was tending bar part-time on the side to kind of fund my beginning of professionalism. I had mucked about with photography for about 13 years, doing the stringing, doing some, little bits here and there, but not, to the point where my wife was like getting ready to throw my camera out if I didn't start using it again, because, you run into some. But we went to the next spot when I finally said, okay, I'm going to go pro. And I think I'm going to give you the guy's name. You would not know who he is. He was a boat captain and his name was Jimmy Loveland. And Jimmy Loveland is the reason I'm a professional photographer as good as I am. Yeah, because Jimmy said he had a Hasselblad and he was a boat captain, but he had a Hasselblad and he was a good photographer. And I said, yeah, well, we were talking at the bar one night while I was, keeping some cash coming in. And he said, well, just because you call yourself a professional photographer doesn't mean you can be one. And I just went, I'll show you.
There was your challenge, huh?
Yeah, it was that next little thing.
Yeah.
The thing about photography that I really like is that you continually grow. Because I'm looking here, the same year that I did this image, I also did that one.
Oh,
and it was like, okay, I'm not a baby photographer. I wasn't a baby photographer, but this was a special request from one of my commercial clients. Would you please create something different? And I really, and when I finished it and got it all done, I was like, that isn't very good. And I'm still up in the air with it, but they were ecstatic. So if your client's happy, you're happy. I'm also,
well, isn't that a good point?
yes.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I was just looking here.
Isn't that a good point? What pleases the client is more important what pleases us, or is it vice versa, or equal?
How do you got to be careful there?
I think you get better at pleasing your client when you've learned enough to please yourself. I'm never, are you ever happy with an image totally? Oh man, that hand could have been just a little different. Or, oh gosh, the head was not tilted quite the way I wanted. Or gosh, that hand, there's always something you can pick apart. Because sometimes we get a little bit too picky. And so as long as your client's happy, that's, from your monetary standpoint, your business standpoint, that's important. But I think like I say, those self-assignments are where I really try and drive to do some different things. Kind of looking in here to see what have we got. Let me go down here. Oh, so you were talking about me being a little weird, or a lot weird.
I didn't say that myself, but I would agree. But it's
I did.
We're all in that same boat, though.
Okay, so when you commit, this again is a self-assignment here. Obviously, nobody's going to hire me to create the alchemist office, as you will. But it was, can I take, something like this and these images that are here, oops, come back on, and come up with, a different world and a different place.
Yeah.
So this was just
crazy.
Gathering.
How far did that go in the competition?
It never merited.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Nope, not at all.
I would have.
What do they know?
That all the way.
Hey, there's,
or as Jeff and I call it, and maybe you, Bob, loan.
Well, thank you for the thought.
Oh my goodness.
But the idea was, could I, place this character inside this bowl? Is it believable? To me, everything was the reality was within the fantasy. And if you're doing artwork, that's one thing that I find that's really important, that you can create the reality within the fantasy. If you've the movie Avatar, just take that as an example. There are no blue people who breathe underwater and swim like fish and la la la. But within 5 minutes of watching that movie, do we not just get sucked into the story and everything? It's because everything has depth and dimension and all the shadows and the lighting and everything moves. And to me, that's the reality within the fantasy is important when you're creating this kind of artwork. And then you can go the other way.
Let me ask you this real quick, back on
Sure.
On those concept images. Is this something that you just kind of think, I mean, do you come up with a theme and say, I'm going to accomplish this, or do you just start gathering parts of similar theme and then kind of put it together and see where you end up?
It depends. This one was, something similar. It started with the young lady, and then it was like, ooh, you know what? What kind of a world can we create here? This one did, when I turned it to black and white, this one did end up getting to the merit level. But I mess around with water drops a lot.
Yeah.
And so I kind of combined the water drops, added the earth, gave her some wings. It does look better in black and white. But you get the idea. So it was, how can you create the reality within? And the reason this didn't go so well in color was because as I look at it now, it's like, no, the reality in that fantasy is not there. But in black and white, when everything kind of is now tones, it worked very well.
So this brings up another question in the same. We're talking about competition a lot on our show here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you creating something that you think, okay, I'm going to enter this in competition, or are you solely going by where your own vision takes you, and then if it goes for competition, great. If not, it doesn't matter.
Number two.
Okay.
It's that I'm trying to stretch and see if I can make things happen.
So you're more pleasing your own competition in your mind than
a bunch of judges. Absolutely. But then as you know, I do a lot of different genres.
Right.
Can we do something
nice
that can, live really nicely?
This is tough stuff, guys, to do this kind of work with glass and liquids, and it isn't that easy. So this is just awesome stuff.
I'll throw a quick tip in.
You know what I appreciate what you're doing, Bob, is the palette of your work. In other words, landscape, commercial, the surreal work. Do you have a favorite genre that you like to work in, or
the one that I'm working on now?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it's constantly, it's okay. Can I create, this? And while, since we're talking about image competition, and you, Jeff, when you mentioned that this is not easy, that is very true, because the glass sees everything around it. It sees all. Yeah. But one thing you can do when you can create a nice highlight, but here's a trick for you. Circle that highlight, put it up on its own layer, and then run a Gaussian blur on it.
Sure.
And now you have this nice ooh, as opposed to sharp edges. And I do like that with almost all of those with cars, with any kind of a specular highlight. If you take and put it on its own layer, Gaussian blur it, and blend it in, it just has that.
Do you just leave that layer on normal, or do you put it on soft light or something else?
Usually probably on Gaussian. I just lower the opacity.
Okay, so you just
and yeah, you can try. And again, blend modes is something that you can try as well.
Great tip. We're talking about a lot about the kind of the esoteric approach to everything, but for the education part of it, can you kind of walk us through the lighting?
Sure. So this is set on a black background, on a black foreground.
Is it on a table?
It's on a table, but it's built up. There's a stage on the table. So there's a black cloth over, I don't know, there's some old boxes or whatever that are sitting there. Whatever I have laying around the studio ends up in that space.
Okay.
And then so behind there, in order to create that light, there is a 4-foot NAND light that is set to pure red. So you can dial with the NAND lights, you can dial into color. So it's basically a long tube light.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's dialed into a really super deep red. And in order to get that deep red, you need to have a black background to shine it on.
Sure, not white.
You can't use a white, you can't use a gray, because if you used a white, that red would turn pink.
Sure.
And if you used a gray, it would be kind of, in the middle there. To get those rich, deep colors, you have to underexpose a little bit and work against a black background. And then the lights on the side. So I have main light from over on, actually I have a main light, and then we have reflectors. So there's white cards coming in to create these lights. And then the other thing that I do is, if it's not working for the whole thing, I will light individual pieces and not care what this looks like. So I'll photograph just for this glass, then I'll photograph just for this highlight, then I'll photograph for this highlight, okay. I'll photograph for here, and then I'll take all those images, layer them together, and take what I want from each.
Right.
I could do it straight up, but it actually takes me less time to make the multiple images versus trying to light everything perfect.
You answered my question, because my question was going to be, can you do it in one shot?
Yes.
You can spend hours on that.
Yes, you can, but you would have so much more time invested in there.
Right.
The thing is, you have to have the picture in the final piece. So what do you need in there? Oh, I need a reflection over here. Oh, I want a different, I want a full-on color reflection over here. I want a blank so you have to pre-visualize what it's going to look like at the end, and then make those individual decisions.
Okay, so Bob, and this begs the question, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, before digital,
I'd have charged more money and done it in one shot.
That answers my question.
On slide film. And I used to do that.
That makes the true master, though, I think, because if you can build this set in one shot, have that vision of what you need to create with your gobos and your reflectors and all those things, and especially working with glass with a liquid in it that's probably a medium to light brown. You get the red showing through, so it really enhances the liquor.
Correct. And you've got separate images for the labels and stuff, whereas back in the day I would have had to have had a mirror sitting there to light that specific spot that way. I would have if you weren't able to do the Gaussian blur thing like we couldn't do back in the day, you would take, instead of having just a flat piece of paper, you would take a curved piece of paper. And now, because you have that curve, you have the shadow on either side of that that's reflecting onto the product. So there was a lot of tricks.
Jeff and I have talked about this a million times back in the days, late 70s, 80s, whatever. Being in the darkroom, printing our own work just made you a better photographer, because when you went to photograph something, you knew, I got to do this right now, so I don't have to work on it in the darkroom. Is that right, Bob?
I used to hear this on a regular basis. Are you okay? What do you mean, are you okay?
I recognize that knock.
I was just worried about you. You've been gone for 8 hours.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I remember, because I shot a lot of stuff. I shot clothes for Sears for a few years, but that was crazy. But any glassware I did is we would use Vaseline or nail polish on a certain part of the glass, so you'd get that diffused highlight as opposed to just letting it be sharp on the glass itself. And that was an art to be and spraying, but that was an art to get the nail polish to not have an edge to it or make it look like an obvious streak. I mean, that was, like you said, that was an art in itself, just setting up these shots.
And glycerin on food products to highlights.
Yeah, and I remember one shoot we had with was desserts, and nothing was edible. I mean, the ice cream was mashed potatoes and all that kind of crazy stuff.
Not allowed to do that anymore.
No, it's got to be the
You're right.
Truth in advertising. Yeah. But hey, when you did a good job, those mashed potatoes, man, you'd love to get a big bowl of those and put some strawberry sauce on.
I did do an ice cream shoot in the Caribbean.
Oh my goodness.
And they gave me these 5-gallon buckets, but boy, it was, my dog was so sick afterwards because we had just dumped it outside.
Tell us about this image.
This is beautiful.
This is over at the Imperial Sand Dunes near Brawley, California. I just went over again with the intention of, seeing if I could capture the undulations of the desert, and I happened to catch this nice little storm that came rolling across the back there. That made all the difference. And this was shot in infrared, by the way.
Okay.
And that's kind of what made it go. And the fact that it was shot in infrared actually kept it from getting a merit the first time around.
Really? What
because
was
somebody went, oh well, they didn't realize this is the look. This is exactly
are those
what
golden? Aren't those Golden Sands? That place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like Death Valley. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's gorgeous. But the fact that they're, just the way they move and catching the light at the right time and stuff.
Right. It's beautiful. Well, then the sky, and it's so hard to get a beautiful landscape and to have a sky that works with it, that doesn't take over. And look at the two different types of clouds. It just really enhances the depth of the scene just tremendously.
Well, the strange part is, and obviously I don't know if I was, seeing it in my head. Obviously, we've got this cropped into a Slim Jim to make it a little bit longer, but I ended up playing this shadow area against this area here, and they kind of mimic each other. And it was like you start finding, you start enhancing for things like there's a lot of dodging and burning in this.
Sure.
So we're bringing down bringing shadows down and bringing highlights up.
Right.
And just if you're looking for a tip for that, a light area next to a dark area will make them both be bigger.
Yeah.
So you can create more contrast by adding some highlights sometimes rather than adding more shadow, or vice versa.
True.
And Bob, you being an approved affiliate juror, there's a lot of talk about when we see landscapes and scenics, well, doggone it, those shadows are so blocked up. There's no detail in the highlights.
Oh, I'm the first one to say that.
And a lot of times it's not so much looking into the shadows or appreciating the texture of the highlights, but enjoying the overall essence of the image. Does that make any sense at all?
Sure. The thing where I end up saying, my gosh, the shadows are so blocked up. We have the capabilities of having, you don't need a lot. You can still have a deep, dark area that will give you that contrast. But when it's blocked up, and if this area in here was as dark as that area there, I would call this a blocked up shadow.
Well, don't you find your brain just goes to that area and you're looking for detail. Your brain's trying to figure out what's going on, and you lose the whole message. You lose the whole.
If it's just mush, if it's just nothing, then that is a concern in landscape photography for me. Now we all have, obviously we all have our own opinions, but this is something that we can photograph for that,
right,
without a lot of extra effort.
Right.
Excuse me.
Well, I think it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And that's that same area, which is why I went out there, because I wanted to photograph the Milky Way. And I was like, oh, I planned it all out in my head. I got so excited. And then Brawley appeared over here. And, I didn't take the fact that there would be the glow of the town chewing up all the wonderfulness of the Milky Way. So, but I did I did not stop shooting just because the plan that was in my head wasn't being completed all the way. I still think this turned out to be a pretty cool image.
I do too. Hey, and again, going back to the technical side of it, can you share with us your equipment, exposure time,
Sure. So for
more or
the
less? I
for the
mean, I don't.
sky for the sky is probably around a 20-second exposure.
Okay.
And then for the foreground, that was a lot longer. And then there was some post in there to, again, some dodging and burning to give it a little bit more life, to bring it together. Obviously, we're knocking down the highlights in the skyline, and we're trying to enhance the Milky Way. But again, this Milky Way is nowhere near the kind of Milky Ways that I like to get.
Yeah.
But I, like I say, I didn't stop and went for it. And I really enjoy this composition, which is just so total. Normally you're like, well, where's the foreground? Well, it was supposed to be the Milky Way, but
Yeah.
I couldn't pull up much more than what was there, just because when you have more light in the sky, it knocks out the little fuzzies in the clouds that are in the galaxy.
Well, personally, I really enjoy the diagonal position of the Milky Way as opposed to the bottom left where that highlight is. It just, there's a balance there for me.
And again, that's
absolutely.
dodging and burning and playing and making sure your tones all work together.
Yeah.
Let's see if I got something else.
Yeah, and I want to say before we get in at the end of the show, tell us about your Milky Way workshops and tours that you lead, and that's for the gang too. I mean, talk about the CMH, but come back to that if you would.
Sure. Yeah, we can pop back there in a sec. This helped represent the U.S. and at the Photographic World Cup in 2016, and I helped bring down the U.S. because they had won the first 2 years. And when I got in, we were not so good.
Your efforts blew it. Oh, geez.
Well, I like the way you phrased that. I helped him bring it down.
Like it was a concerted effort.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was good. I was good. So Rick, this is what you were referring to earlier.
Yes.
This is a step and repeat. And this was before I learned some of the shortcuts that we can do now. This had to do button pushes, button pushes, button pushes, button pushes. Mm-hmm. And then I had to invert each one and put the next. So this one was on the bottom originally.
Oh.
And this one was on the top. So if you look, there's quite a few images in there, and they all had to be change their position. So it was like drag the one from the bottom all the way to the top. Yeah, it was a project.
How much time did you put into that, Bob?
We probably got 60 hours, maybe.
Oh my goodness.
It started with this guy right here. It's a blue and gold macaw, and he was at one of the in Sarasota. They had a bird sanctuary.
Yes, they do.
And when he went like this and looked over his shoulder, in my head, I started to see something. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but I extracted the bird from the scene and then started replicating him in a lot of this took a lot of time because I was experimenting with how to get it to do the Fibonacci move, which, you have to change the size of the bird and the position of the bird each time. And then you just keep replicating it over and over again. One of the secrets is to make sure that you have the proper drop shadow on the subject first. Okay. Otherwise you don't get the depth and dimension.
Right.
And so
I'm noticing that the drop shadow on the top wing, the first wing on top, is much different than the bottom wing, bottom right. There you go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more, how can I say it?
Well, it definitely follows the right direction. I mean, it's realistic.
Yeah.
It's just a drop shadow in the same
what I'm saying is he's following that that shadow to the opacity that's where I was going with it.
Yeah,
is
it got
much
a
less.
little darker there because there was an extra one in there, but I
Right.
wanted the top piece here to be separated from the bottom. So this is
Yeah.
section 1, section 2, and then if you look, it's blended here to section 3 into the bottom.
Wow.
So these are all, I made a whole bunch of different sections and then blended the sections together as well.
Yeah.
And then the background is actually some yellow jasmine flowers that
Really?
were in a pile that had fallen off, and that was the background. And then added some smoke and changed over the color texture
Wow.
to turn it here. Once I hit that last color texture, because when this was bright, the blue and gold, it just wasn't working. As soon as I hit that last bit of color and just everything,
Yeah.
kind of glued together, that was the final for making it work.
I think your color palette that you chose here is what makes this thing really.
Yeah. And
pleasing.
I've got a couple or three more questions. I know we're getting towards the end of our time, and that's a shame because we could do this for a day and a half and a year to boot. You talked about this project was something for an art gallery. How do you incorporate that into your, are you showing at galleries? I'm
Yes.
presuming.
Yes, I'm at the Gallery of Modern Masters here in Sedona, and I had a real problem getting into galleries. Hey, Cliff, if you want to put up my contact information,
Yeah, I'll
that
do
might be a
that.
cool thing. There's successful-photographer.com is where you'll find my Milky Way workshops.
That was going to be my
and-
third question.
and all that stuff. Yeah, I was just dropping that in there, but I figured Cliff could drop that in there.
We'll put that up.
bcphotography.com is my commercial set. And then the coatsart.net is my artistic website.
I
Okay.
can't do that, Bob, while you're sharing the screen.
No, put it,
it's
no,
just-
not up here. Just put it on in the chat.
Yeah. You
Just
can pull
copy and
up the
paste it in the chat, and then they can find it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I was having problems getting my work into galleries because I would come in and they'd say, "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I'm a digital artist." So's my niece and my third cousin once removed, and you do photography
Everyone
too?
is.
Yeah, everyone is. So I went all in and marketed this. That's my logo, which is a giant capital C with Coates, and then it's lens-based artist. So when
You're
they said,
defining it for them before they ask.
what do you do? I create lens-based art. Oh, what is that? So that gave me the opportunity to begin the conversation and say, well, all of my source material comes through a camera lens. After that, all bets are off. And then, add in a lot of art speak about color and depth and dimension and building shadows, and that it wasn't just, hey, I pushed the Da Vinci button.
Yeah, and they were okay with that explanation. I mean, they bought that.
Yep.
That's cool. That's
And
good.
that made a big difference. But I went all in. I mean, I'm
Sure,
fully
yeah.
branded, and it was kind of can I make this happen? But that was probably the only way it was gonna.
Well,
So
and I
Sedona,
can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're sharing with us.
Well, tell us about you have some workshops coming up, you said on the next
workshops
guide.
are May through October. That's I have, in order to be a guide on the Coconino Forest, I can only do it for 6 months of the year. So I picked the beginning of May through the end of October, and the dates are all on successful-photographer.com. There's a full Milky Way workshop page dedicated to that tells you about, how things work. I won't go into that. But then there's also a frequently asked questions about, what do you need and what can you use? So even if you don't come to the workshop, you may go, oh, you know what? I didn't know that I could, should use this kind of a camera or this kind of a lens.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, we'll be happy to publish all of your contact information, your workshops and sites on our site. And
It actually is all there right now, so don't make sure everybody go to the Image Critique Show and pull up Bob's page for this evening, and all his links and all that stuff is on that page. So check that out. Definitely.
So my
And
wife's
go to
wife's
his workshops too.
my wife says that I'm obsessed with the night sky, and
That's all right.
she's right.
Could be worse things, right?
Because-
You're obsessed with.
Yes, sir. That's what I keep saying. But here's an example of that. This is the Geminids meteor shower this year. It was a really good one. The moon was pretty much tucked away for the night. I started at 8 o'clock at night and photographed to 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh wow.
And then I went through. So I've got one camera that's just rolling images over and over and over again. And then you go through and you pick out the ones that have the meteors in them and you put them there. And this is what it looks like when that's how they kind of came in all night long.
Right.
But if you you see a lot of meteor showers, and there's what they call the origin point. And where is the radiant of the thing? And if you, whoops, next one over. If you redo them and you rotate every image around, here's the Big Dipper, and then here, so the Big Dipper is pointing to Polaris. So
Right.
I took every image that had a meteor in it and then rotated it around so that the Big Dipper sat on top and the Polaris sat there, and then that shows you this is where those meteors all radiated from.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you what, in 1965 or 67, when I was first processing 4x5 negatives, and this would be a black and white negative, Dad would ask me, how'd you get all those scratches on the negative? I think there's not going to be too many of us to understand what I just said.
That's funny. You got to work hard at that, huh?
Gosh, Bob. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff.
You can definitely see your passion in all your work here, Bob. I mean, from the composites to this night sky stuff, it definitely has, it's just oozing of excitement and your passion for what you're doing. So that's what I like to see, is that kind of feeling. And not just from talking to you, but just seeing your images. It just has. And I think I have to say, I think that the image that you sent us to use on your page, where the top of your head's popping open and all your ideas are coming out. I mean, that's how I know you. So that's perfect for all of this. So everybody go take a look at that page to see what I'm talking about.
The only thing that I like more than the creation of it is the sharing of the technology and the techniques and the ideas. When I do a workshop or when I teach, it's when I'm seeing the light bulbs pop over people's heads going, I get that now. That
That's
to
cool,
me is just freaking huge.
Yeah.
That's your pay. That's your pay right there. If you could get by without money.
Yeah. The problem I had, I taught Texas school a couple years ago, and while I was there, the main complaint was he never let us go pee.
That's a good complaint to have.
He was like, oh no, because I just so want to, get the information out there. And this next Texas school is going to be a little bit more gentle. I've got timers now.
Pee break timers.
Okay, it's 10 of, okay, you got 5 minutes. Be back.
Now, when you teach a class, Bob, do your students frequently contact you afterwards to give you updates or ask more questions? Or, I mean,
Yeah, I'm always happy. If somebody didn't understand something, I'm always happy to answer a question here and there if it's just a quick question or a couple of minutes. If somebody wants to get more in depth, I have had people like get on and think that they could have me for half an hour or 45 minutes, and like, no, that's going to cost a few dollars. So I do have mentor programs as well. You'll find that on the Successful Photographer site.
Okay, that was my next question. Yeah,
Bob.
Yes, sir.
I have 2 more questions, and that's it.
Okay.
1.
Don't believe him. Because whenever he asks a question, another one pops up. So
true that. Your mentors. I wouldn't ask who's your best or favorite or whatever, but
a good question.
A couple, 3 or 4 mentors. that guided.
I don't know if you know this. You guys would know this name. I don't know. A lot of people would. Jim DiVitale.
Oh, wow.
gosh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Eddie Tapp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's a strange character there.
Yeah. Yes. But a brilliant lighting technician and artist. Oh, they're just absolutely amazing. Not exactly photography per se, but Skip Cohen.
Oh, yeah.
Skip Cohen,
He was WPPI for the number of years. He worked with Hasselblad and Polaroid.
Right.
He is somebody who encouraged me to the point of when I first came back from France, I had been looking for a camera to travel with because my wife was always like, "Why are you always carrying 35 pounds of gear with you?" I said, "What's your problem? You're not carrying it." And she goes, "Well, you're not either because it's sitting in the room because it's too heavy." Oh, geez, women are so smart. So I tried, 3 or 4 different point and shoots, but my files fell apart. And when the Panasonic came out with the Lumix GH2, that was the first camera that was kind of geared toward professionals, a little bit more toward the video side, but it was a small camera.
Right.
Matter of fact, I'm still using one of those.
Yeah, you
the
bought
GX85.
Don't you, Bob? You had.
Well, I repped with Panasonic for about 6 years due to Skip, because he was like, "Well, with your I came back from a trip to France. The camera was on my shoulder and a couple of lenses were on my waist for the entire trip. And the files did not fall apart when I got back. So I was showing Skip my artwork. I said, "Look this was so incredible." He says, "Well, with your excitement about the artwork and the camera, you should get with Panasonic." I was like, no. He probably said it about 5 times. And at the WPPI convention, he says, "Oh, this is a family show, right? F you. I'm introducing you to Panasonic." Wow. So I sat down with the guy from Panasonic and I said, and we're chatting and he's watching his booth. I'm looking and he's watching his booth and I'm like, okay, good. He's not even listening. He doesn't even care. Why? I don't know why Skip introduced me to him. And I said, one question that I did ask him, I said, "Well, what if I'm speaking on your dime and this camera's not ready for primetime pros yet? It's just, the quality isn't there for commercial work."
Right.
And let's say I shot this with a Canon. What do I tell people? He says, "You tell them you shot it with the Canon. It's proper tool for the proper job." And that's when I knew I could work with them. And then he called me a couple of days later, and that started a 6-year relationship. And then Panasonic let me go, and Olympus said, "Hey, Bob, we see you're not with Panasonic anymore. Would you like to try some of our Olympus gear?" "Yeah, sure." And I just found that while Panasonic was pushing and moving into their full frame and putting their research toward the full frame cameras, Olympus was pushing the computational imaging. And I've kind of, most of my main camera gear now is with the Olympus, and no longer Olympus, but now the OM1 systems. But I am a big fan of Micro Four Thirds. And over the years, even from the very beginning, people were always, "Oh, well, they're not big enough. You don't have a big enough sensor. It's too small. It's too small." And I'm like, you see what I create and you see the kind of people that I work with. So I've never had a problem using the Micro Four Thirds system.
I appreciate that. And my last question would be, what advice or offering would you give anyone either in the industry now or wanting to get into the photographic artistry community?
Learn marketing, learn business. Do not undersell your work. It's too easy to get, if somebody, kind of complains, it's that old thing if you've ever been in sales and you've been in any sales training, the next person who speaks loses.
Yep.
True. So if you quote a price, they may be going in their head going, "Oh, geez, I could probably get that on the kitchen wall." And you're thinking, they're going, "Oh, well, I can give it to you for $1,200 instead of $1,500.
Right.
Oh, and then they see that they've got the weakness. And, well, no, how about 500?
Well,
right.
I got to tell you, Bob,
marketing, business, learning how to write press releases. On the Successful Dash Photographer site, there's a whole section on press releases and how to make them work and how to write them. And everybody, a lot of times people say, well, they don't work. Well, look on mine. There's a whole bunch of samples there, and I've got a stack about this high of press, across the room there. So, learn the marketing. I can't tell
you how much I appreciate what you're saying. We spent so little time on that, and we've got to have you back at some point, maybe to
we could go on for 3 more hours here.
The marketing and because unless you're a hobbyist and it's pretty, it's cute, give it to my niece, nephew. That ain't gonna cut it if you want to make a living.
True enough.
I really appreciate that. Cliffy.
Yeah.
Before we close down, any questions that you might have?
No, I had some, but Bob answered them, so I'm good.
That's how good he is. He knows the question before he asked.
That's right. Yeah.
I've been doing this for a little while.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. How long have you been doing it, Bob? When did you?
Started as a pro March of '95, and then picked up and put down and mucked about for 13 years before that.
Wow.
Hey, Bob, stop sharing your screen, will you?
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry. I can do that.
There we go.
There you are. And to our viewers, gosh, thank you so much for spending time with us. A lot of things you could have been doing tonight, but
we appreciate that.
Nothing better than the time you spent here.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, go to the site and just sign up as one of our members. Rick and I are working on some project that will benefit being a member. And you'll get some exclusive offers and all those kind of fun things. So go ahead and help us out since we're still trying to get all this stuff rolling. And we've got some other great interviews coming up for this year. But we were so excited to start off here with Bob. And this first night, we're glad you tuned in. I found out at the last minute here that one of the clubs that usually has a lot of members that listens in has a club meeting tonight. So I think they're off doing that. So this will teach you. They'll learn which group to go with next time. But
that's right.
Before you sign off, we have a couple of thank yous there. On the Kathy Ferguson says she appreciates your insights and your work, and Rita Walters also thank you for your insights. So,
absolutely. Like I say, that's one of my second beside making images themselves is being able to share and help people make their images better.
Yeah, that's cool. I know you've helped me in the past with some we've all judged together for PPA and just really it's a pleasure to just listen to you talk when you talk about an image, when you describe whether it's a challenge or just helping somebody out. It's just really a different point of view, and that's very refreshing in this day and age. Hey, I wanted to mention one of our listeners, he's a Colorado boy. Don is in Australia listening to us. So we're all around the world tonight.
From down under. That's where the down under comes from. Okay.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. So yeah. So I don't know. We can go on forever, or we can say thank you so much, Bob, for being our guest. It's been a pleasure just listening and chatting with you. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet, Bob. Good to
Bob,
see you again.
Love to have you back if you're okay with it somewhere down the line.
Standing by to stand by, as they say.
All right, man.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. There'll be more. We're going to go back to our image critique platform in February, and we'll have. Who's our guest? Chris.
Chris Woolley.
Chris Woolley is going to be our guest juror, and he's got some really interesting points of view. So tune in for that. Submit some images.
And then
like
Kevin
we'll ask you to do. What's that?
And then Kevin Holiday.
Kevin Holiday, who's a totally new, a dear old friend of ours, but he's definitely in a different world, in the PPA world. He tried it and he's doing some different stuff, black and white, long exposure.
Beautiful black and white work.
He's going to be our
gorgeous
guest for next time for the March meeting. So stay tuned for that one. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Take care. Ricky, we'll see you soon. Bob, thanks again.
You're welcome.
Bet.
Cliff, thank you so much as usual. Appreciate it.
WINO, Wonderful Wino.
Wonderful Wino Radio.
That finishes out the 50,000 watt radio station.
I got to go hang out with better people.
You won't find any better.
Can I come with you, Cliff?
Yeah, yeah.
Good night, guys.
Good night,
Love y'all.
everybody.
Thank you for watching the Image Critique Show with Jeff Johnson and Rick Avalos. Learn more by checking them out at theimagecritiqueshow.com.